Welcome to Forge the Man, professional excellence meet vocational clarity. Through the intercession of Mary, Mother of fairest love, and the teachings of Saint Jose Maria Escrivá, we help Catholic men sanctify their work, find their mission. Whether you're called to build a family or serve the kingdom of the world as a single man, the forge is hot and the hammer is ready. Let's go to work. Today our guest is a physician. He went to UC Davis as an undergraduate and then went to UC Davis also, School of Medicine. He practices medicine in Fresno and also teaches. And I'll let him get more into detail on that. But anyways, welcome Dominic, and we're glad to have you in the Forge today.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Paul. Like Paul said, my name is Dominic Dizon. I've been practicing internal medicine for the past 30 years and also emergency medicine for the past 25 years. And I also teach, I see patients, and I do some administrative leadership. And I'm married to a wonderful woman named Nuha, and she and I have 8 beautiful children together.
Dominic, let's get right into what you did or do now. Is that what was one of the hardest hurdles for you that you faced during medical school or residency, and how did you overcome it?
Yes, I will go ahead and be a little personal because the hardest hurdle I encountered during medical school was in my first year. I was engaged actually with another person whom I've been seeing for a while, and unfortunately that didn't turn out well. She decided she couldn't wait for me anymore, and so we parted ways. So it came to the point where I wasn't even going to my classes, and the dean of the medical school, of course, noticed it and called me over to talk to him. And he said, "No, what's going on?" And I said, I just lost my focus. I felt like I didn't have the desire to continue with medicine at that point. So he said, why don't you take some time off, think it over, and if you're ready, try to come back." And so I thought that was it for me. I was considering another career, but then luckily my parents saw through that and they had me do a trip to Europe. So they had me visit the Vatican, and most especially they had me visit Lourdes in France. And I went by myself because it was a journey for me to discover myself again. And for those of you who have been through Lourdes, it was during the procession of the handicapped and the disabled when I kind of saw, the most hopeful people in the world. They're in wheelchairs, they're in stretchers, but it would just, they had just that happy face in them. They knew that they're going against the odds, and somehow I knew that that was it for me. That I was being called to perhaps help these patients, my future patients that I would encounter throughout my life, and that I had this calling for my profession to actually help heal, not just help heal them, but help heal myself through them. And so I came back and I regained my focus, helped my friends, and ended up meeting the person who I ended up marrying, Nuha, and that was 30 years ago. So
Wow,
that's how it happened.
wow, that was it was really good advice by your professor to do that to you, and his interest in you. Now you teach too, so do you have opportunities to help your students in the way your teacher helped you?
Absolutely, absolutely. As a professor of medicine with a student almost every day, and sometimes 2 students every day, and they usually stay with me for a month, and so it's my job, my responsibility to teach them internal medicine and how to interact with patients. So you get to know them really well, and they come from all different backgrounds. Some of them are married, most of them are single, some older, some younger. So they share with you some of their challenges every day, whether it's academic or even personal. And so so you try to be You try to be a good mentor to them, but also help them that that there's always hope. Whatever it is that they're going through, there's always hope. And if it was in their vocation to be a physician, then it will happen. It will happen.
Dominic, looking back, what was the most valuable thing you did in college beyond just grades? What actually prepared you for the reality of being a physician?
Yes. So when I was an undergrad, I actually started as an engineering major because I did it because most of my friends were from high school were ended up becoming engineering students. So I said that must be really good. I'll go ahead and join them. And then I would say in after my first year, I joined. It was back at UC Davis. I joined this volunteer group where all they did was actually go house to house. This is in Yuba City, near Sacramento, and they would go house to house, trying to ask medical questions of this labor camp, and this labor farming camp where they had these day workers who were not even from this country. They're usually from Central America, South America, and there were a lot of farms. So they would come in. They are seasonal workers, but they would stay in these almost like concentration camps, and sometimes no running water. Most of the time, no health care. And I would actually train myself in Spanish even to ask medical questions of all of them. And the thing that really did it for me wasn't even medical. The thing that I noticed was, like I said, there was no running water to each one, and that made the potency of the water really bad, and that gave them disease. So I asked the organizer of the labor camp, volunteer as well, why is it that we can't enact something where we can get the a tank of city water, a full tank to maybe go to these labor campers, camp workers, and provide water on a regular basis. So he said, "Hey, that's a great idea." And so we had to petition the city. We had to do some permits, and guess what? After months and months of pushing, it finally happened. It was just a great feeling to be able to make a difference on the lives of these people, even not directly medical, but just something to alleviate their life. And I said, if I could do that and make a difference of something like that, what more if I could make a difference in actually saving somebody's life or, preventing disease. So that did it for me. I ended up switching to pre-med, and the rest was history.
Well, it's a great story. Dominic, beyond science and grades, what soft skills like time management, empathy, or communication should people be developing right now that might be considering medicine or in any other profession?
Absolutely. So I have to say, it's the skill to be able to listen to another human being. And so I say that because, I evaluate all of these medical students, resident physicians, fellows. And up until now, even myself and all my providers that we hired for the practice, we're always tested on a quality metric called how well did the physician listen to you while you were there with him or her in the office. And that's usually tagged with also how much information did you gather from them while you were listening to them. So the ability to empathize and to listen to another person, to another human being, I think it's invaluable. And that's a skill that you should probably start cultivating right now, whether you're in junior college or college, to be able to listen to another person. And one of the things I tell my learners, whether they're students, residents, or fellows, is that, when the rubber meets the road, let's say you're already a physician, you already finished medical school, and you're doing your residency and internship, and everybody knows that's when you work the hardest. So when you are there being called to the ER, 2 o'clock in the morning, after seeing your eighth or ninth patient back to back to back, and being there, you yourself lack of sleep. At that point, what really motivates you to listen to this other person, this other human being? And that's really when you really gauge yourself. What is it that motivated you to go to medicine? It's not the fame, it's not the prestige, definitely not the money. It's right there, right then, when that other person is probably even cursing at you or spitting at you, and but they need that help. So you're there to listen to them and to really assess what's wrong with them, so you can help them. So to be able to cultivate that skill of listening right now in this early in your life, I think is invaluable later on at your career as a physician.
You mentioned two things, like money, and then also residency. But I'd first like to ask you about residency. I've heard a lot of stories that you're almost like an indentured servant. Could you speak to that? Like that, what does that entail? Can you give some of the finer details?
Oh, absolutely. So people when potential physicians, people want to be doctors in the future, they always look at the long, how do you say, the long path you have to take, the long journey you have to take to be a physician. That's true with everything that's worth something in life. There is usually a long path. So so most of you probably in college, after 4 years of college or so, then you go to medical school, which is 4 years, and then but you're already a physician. Then you already get your MD degree or your DO degree, and then but then you can't be on by yourself yet. So you have to go to training for at least 3 years, sometimes more, before you can be on your own. So even though you're a doctor, you're still training with somebody. So like myself, who's an attending physician, a professor, so they will help you through those 3 years. You write your own orders, you see your own patient, but you still have to present your patient to an attending physician. You're already getting paid, yes, not a lot, but enough to survive. But you will be working, it's a rite of passage, you'll be working really hard in the hospitals and outpatient. So it's called being a resident. Being a resident physician is the 3 years of training. When you're, people will call it a junior doctor. So you're a training doctor, already a physician, but still a training doctor.
What about the finances in order to like become a doctor? Like as a firefighter, we a lot of times would have a doctor that's or a student in training to become a doctor, and a lot of them would tell me that they were in debt and they expected to be in debt for some time. Can you talk to that? Because maybe if somebody wants to be a doctor, in a sense, it should be assumed that you're probably going to take on some debt. Is that how it normally works?
Yes, yes. So a lot of people get discouraged because of the financial aspects. Um, I'm going to go ahead and give myself as an example. I am a first generation immigrant. So I came in here with nothing. So my parents immigrated. I went with them. And so we had nothing. So I did have to have some loans. I was able to be lucky enough to get some grants, but I had to work some through college. And basically, I did provide loan. I did acquire some loans, but the loans I got were, I would say, only the minimal to sustain myself. So you have to be able to know what to sacrifice. So you won't be able to get the new car. You won't be able to live in the fanciest place. You just have to you just have to do with the bare minimum. And I was actually lucky enough to have a loan that is a lot less than most other students. Um, so it is so don't I would have to advise, don't let finances deter. If you really want to be a physician sometime in your life, you know, it will happen. It will happen. There's ways that you could do to get grants and fellowships. If you have to take loans during medical school, eventually you should be able to pay them off, like I did mine. So it yes, you do have to take in loans, but um, if you live within your means, and there's such a term as delayed gratification. If you're able to delay gratification until probably until after your residency, it will occur. It will happen.
It's almost like taking out a mortgage in a sense.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I think a lot of times when I've talked to doctors, it's taken them a while to dig themselves out of that debt. But with while they work, save their money, be prudent, they're able to live actually a pretty good life if they manage their money well. It would seem to me.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, and even have more than 8 kids if they want.
You know, I'd like to also ask you, what like would you say some traits or qualities that somebody's maybe discerning to be a doctor. I mean, you've been around a lot of students, and not everybody's cut out for that work, but like if somebody was going to take a look inward and say, do I have these traits, or the traits that you would recommend or that you see that students have that are successful?
Absolutely. So no matter how the stage in their life, older, younger, no matter their race or ethnicity, their socioeconomic status, richer or poorer, the thing that I see that's common in successful students is their ability to, how do you say, manage their time and see what their priorities are. So, for example, the students that there is a quality in medicine that we evaluate the student. It's called professionalism. So professionalism is not, how you look or how you talk, how you speak, how you dress up. It's really how you value the profession, how you value the ability to help another human being. So I noticed the students that are most professional, the ones that actually are always punctual, are always willing to help out even though they're done with their task. They say, Doc, I'm done. Is there anything else I can help you with? The ones who are, like I said, they already had seen their quota of patients for that day, but are willing to stay behind a little bit longer because they want to learn more. And so for me, that says this gentleman or this lady really wants to learn the profession, wants to learn the craft, and basically so that they can help somebody else in the future. So what allows them to be able to be punctual and professional is they're there probably 5-10 minutes before the first patient comes in. They're already prepared. In order to do that, they have to be able to manage their time really well. They have to be able to balance. Some of them are married. Some of them are married with kids. So they have to know how to perhaps have even a plan of life where they dedicate enough time for each specific task at home and in school. So there's not a whole lot of time to dilly-dally. And they know what matters the most. They know how to be able to spend their time wisely. So that's a trait, again, that you have to be able to hone and cultivate this early in your life, is time management and having a plan of life.
Yeah, it sounds like the little things, like having a good attitude, being docile, being disciplined, eager to learn. I'm sure you also have to do a lot of study and maybe, like you said earlier, delay gratification. Can you walk us through a typical day of a physician, like in your capacity? I know there's different types of physicians, but like, can you speak to what you do in a typical day for you, or maybe even a week? Because I know maybe sometimes you're doing surgery or teaching.
Absolutely. So I'm gonna go ahead and take Tuesday as an example, because that's usually when Monday is kind of tough, sometimes because of my kids' schools, but Tuesday is probably when I'm most efficient at work. No matter what day of the week, I always set my alarm at 5:55. It's me, and that's also what I tell my patients, that the best time to really sleep at night is somewhere between 10 p.m. to 11 p.m. Usually after that, that's it. The mind just it just gets too tired and it becomes less productive. And then if I'm able to wake up between 5 to 6, that's really when you get the most, it's called sleep cycles, the most REM sleep, the most deep sleep. And so I put myself 5:55 every morning, and I called it the heroic minute. I said, if the alarm gets up at 5, if the alarm is at 5:55, I have to, no matter what, get up at 5:55. Even, you'll be surprised, there's something called the biological clock. Sometimes your body actually wakes up a minute before the 5:55, and then you don't have to hear the alarm. And then the first thing I do, of course, is give thanks and pray. I do my morning prayer, and then I read the gospel. I read the New Testament. I read the readings of the day, and then a little bit of into the news, because a lot of my patients sometimes ask me, "Hello, doc, did you hear the latest thing about?" So I devote very little time, 5-10 minutes, to see what's going on with the world, to kind of current events, and then And then that's it. I do my bathroom duties, but I actually go somewhere between 6:30 to about 7:15 is my exercise time. So I haven't even started working, right? So I go outside. We have a yard. We have a big yard. We live after on the Central Valley, so I turn on all the water for my plants. I do a lot of walking, and I actually play some golf and sometimes even some pickleball in the back.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I'm able to do about 4 rounds of golf. I have a little chip greens. I have 4 chip greens that I did on my own. That was my exercise, and then I come in, take a shower, and I take my kids to their school, and actually go to the luckily the school where I take my kids to has daily mass. They're starting to do classical education, so I'm able to get to the daily mass, which starts at 8:15 to about 8:45, and then 9 o'clock I'm with my first patient. And normally my first patient, to give me some allowance, I let the students see them, and then by the time I get there by 9:15 or so, they're ready to present that first patient. And so I usually see 10 to 11 patients per half day. And I always take a break at lunchtime. I usually take my wife out. My wife luckily works with me in the office. She's the big boss. She's the big manager, and we usually get time to have lunch together. That's when we actually talk business, talk about how to improve. And then in the afternoon, I do the another 10 to 11 patients. We also have an urgent care next door. We have a lot of other doctors and providers who see our urgent care patients. So if they need to have the procedure like a laceration repair or a abscess that they need me to drain, I would drain them for them. And so I do a little bit of minor procedures. I don't go to the hospital to do in the operating room, but I do some minor procedures, and that really keeps up my skills. And then right about 5 p.m. I sit down with the medical student or students to go over some homework cases that I give them from the week before, and to kind of solidify the real patient that they see during the day. I supplement that with some teaching of some clinical vignettes, we call them, and so that we go over all the different systems of internal medicine, kind of help them prepare for their exams as well. And then I finish my notes, and then I try to get home by between 6 or 6:30, because for me that's important for my family. Even though I'm a physician full time, I believe that my vocation is a married Catholic man taking care of 8 children. And although some of them are adults and have grown up, we still have 4 at home that, my wife wants to make sure that, she usually leaves the office before me so she can cook dinner. By the time I get home, she wants to make sure that I don't get home later than 6:30 so we can all eat as a family. And then it's at the dinner table where we ask everybody about their day, and that's when I tell everybody that's our domestic church, meaning that any discussion is up for game. So right next to our dinner table we have something called the battle station, where it shows each child, each kid, what their program is, their schedule for the next week or the next month, so we know exactly who's picking up who, and who needs to go to what game, who needs to go to what symphony, what presentation. So that's usually what we discuss first, is our schedule, and then we discuss any hot topic they want to discuss, whether it's politics, it's religion, it's faith, it's education. That's really where I would say the battleground is. You gotta have that, no matter how busy it is at my work. I have to make sure that I'm there at the end of the day for my kids, because that's where I believe a lot of the formation happens for a lot of them.
Dominic, you've mentioned you have 8 children, and then your wife was a dentist.
Yes.
And how did you manage? That seems like a lot. Most people would be intimidated by that. I think today, very many people are very calculated and think that, I understand things are very expensive, but you and your wife, it seems like, are both able to work and manage your family, be open to children. Can you talk a little bit about your wife and your thinking on this and your openness to children?
Absolutely. So she has been a practicing dentist for the longest time. I think she's a saint. I think there was a time, I think she was still practicing part-time, full-time until our fifth child. She actually had her own practice, so she had to finally sell the practice with child number five. And I remember specifically, her sentence to me was said, "Anybody can be a good dentist in the world, but only I could be the best mom to my kids." And that stuck with me. And so from child number five to child number 7 or 8, she was a full-time mom. And then once the youngest child was, I would say, preschool, kindergarten, and they can pretty much be in school the whole day, she actually went back to part-time and full-time practice again. So that continued until, I would say, about 2 3 years ago. And now, remember when I retired from full-time teaching, we started our own practice called Dizon Medicine, and we started with one office. We now are up to 10. And so she finally had to not do any more paid dentistry, and she became just full-time manager for all the offices. She still kept her license because one of the things we wanted to do is go on medical dental missions, both locally here in the Valley and international. We just came back 2 months ago from the Philippines, where we did 5 days of a free medical dental mission. So she wanted to do that. She wanted to continue that, and we would take a lot of our kids to those missions. So, of course, it's going to be very difficult. It's going to be a lot of struggles. One word that always comes to mind is generosity. There's that saying that, our Lord never gets outdone in generosity. So when he gives you the miracles of the kids, he will make sure that you're able to come up with the time and the resources to follow through. And I would say, so far, we've been really lucky. You mentioned the residency. Our oldest child, Bernadette, actually, and there's a reason why she's Bernadette, right, from the Lourdes, is graduating next week from medical school in San Antonio. And so we're going, my wife and I, and she matched with a residency up at University of Texas. We just found out 3 days ago that she got engaged, that she got proposed to. And so, they do end up growing up. And we're looking forward to her fiance Brian is her classmate, also going to be a physician, and we're looking forward to actually going on missions with both of them, and even more for kids eventually. One of them expressed interest in doing dentistry, the other one we've been doing optometry. So who knows? It's being able to for lack of a better word, being able to model what it is to be a physician, what it is to be a dentist. It's not about yourself. It's not about the prestige. It's definitely not about money. It's about, are you really willing to be there for your patient when the patient needs you at the time when they really need you? And talking about being able to make ends meet, I mentioned the dinner table. One of the words that is most said in a dinner table, besides thank you, please, is the word no. So my kids went to Catholic school, private school, and so a lot of their classmates, don't have a lot of siblings, so they get the latest gadgets, the latest phone, the latest whatever, the latest car. And so we often have this question asked by usually the younger kids. Say, "Daddy, Mommy, Susie has an iPhone, the latest one. Can I have one?" No. Our car is a used 20-year-old Ford Econovan. My classmate Ben has the Tesla that does this with their wings. Can we get that so we can look better? I said no. So they make do with whatever we have. And I remember one time one of the best answers from my 6-year-old kid asking that question about why not this, why not that. My 13-year-old daughter said, Mom and Dad can probably afford what you ask, but they decided to spend their money wisely. So I said, whoa, where'd that come from? And so you're going to have a lot of sacrifices. There's going to be a lot of, like you said, delayed gratification. But in the end, like I said, God will never be outdone in generosity. Things happen. There's a lot of hand-me-downs. All our kids are used to hand-me-downs. It's going to happen. It will be fine.
Yeah, Dominic, as we wrap it up, how would you say your approach to work I mean, you've already mentioned a few times that, like, personal glory and money are not the ultimate purpose. Why do you do your work well?
Absolutely. So there's such a thing as I believe in the sanctification of work, Paul. I believe that we sanctify the work itself or the profession itself. In my case, as a physician, you also sanctify yourself, sanctify me, Dominic, doing the work of a doctor, of a physician. And then while doing that, you also sanctify others. So, what does that mean? When I mean sanctifying my work, and it doesn't even have to be, I have to do my work well as a physician, but you can do your work, any work that it is, when you do it to the best of your ability. So if you're a teacher, not necessarily a medical teacher, if you're a teacher of high school, of preschool, if you prepare your lesson well and able to execute it well in front of your students, that's doing your work well. If you're an engineer, the bridge that you help design and very strong, very sturdy, that's sanctifying your work. If you're a homemaker, where my wife was for many years as a full-time mom, being able to provide cheer at home, everything in order, the children doing their homework, and that's sanctifying your work very well. And while you're doing that, you also sanctify yourself doing it, meaning you see the beauty of work, that it's not just about you, it's about reflecting that to what God wants you to do, right? One of my best friends told me that, they heard from some of my patients that they really enjoyed or they really liked being my patient, and they kept referring other patients to our office. And my friend wanted to tell me that, and so I said, yes, that's really good, but really I'm just a medium. I'm there to provide what God wanted to, how God wanted to, treat that patient, and everything is a reflection on Him. And by realizing that reflection to God, work of God, Opus Dei, that sanctifies me as well. And then finally, you'll never know who you touch. I mentioned that there's a few patients who told other people about how we provide good care to them. Well, guess what? Your students, your co-workers, your colleagues, also will notice, the good work that you do. So in my case, students that write back to me, that email me after they have match, for the residency at the top choice residency, whatever Ivy League residency at the program of their choice, they would say, well, Doc, you really influenced me. You were one of my best teachers. So that's how you affect others. Same thing at home, being a good dad, being a good father, going to church, maybe not just on Sundays, but on a regular basis, maybe even daily. And the way you genuflect in front of the tabernacle, and the way you bend your knee when you pray, you do affect other people. The other people see you. This very busy doctor with a very busy practice, and his wife is also a full-time professional, yet they have 8 kids, and yet they can go to mass and be very punctual to mass and dress appropriately, and all their kids are like stairs, but they're able to do all of that. They are deeply affected by that, and they tell us, and they have, oh no, Doc, you really, what is it? What is your secret? What makes you tick? And that's how you sanctify others, by doing your profession. So you sanctify your work, you sanctify yourself through your work, and you sanctify others by doing your work well.
That's really great. Very good. And Dominic, if as we close, what would you, like a person discerning their professional work, because everybody cannot be a doctor, and some people maybe don't have the talent, but what would you advise them when they're trying to decide on which way to go? Like do you look for a mentor? Do you pray about it? Do you look inwardly? What advice would you give them in trying to discern their professional vocation?
I would say all of the above, Paul. If there's one of the things, so I've counseled and advised on a lot of pre-med students through the years, over the past 30 years. One of the probably mistakes that I see given to them is that there's always a formula to becoming a good pre-medical student, to be able to get to the medical school of your choice. There's really no such thing. When you apply for medical school, of course you have to have a good GPA. You have to have a good MCAT score. That's their, how do you say, that's their threshold. Once you've hit that threshold, and then they invite you for what's called a secondary application, they invite you for an interview. At that point, it's your chance to show how different you are, how unique you are. So for some candidates like myself, it was doing that volunteer work, and that's what made them decide to become a doctor. For some, it might be because they really like the scientific rigor of doing research in a topic of their choice, whether it's pure science or engineering or whatever, because they like that scholarly approach. That's fine too. For some, it's because they have a talent. A lot of my classmates in medical school, they were full-time musicians. They were full-time artists before they became a physician, before they went to medical school. So they just excelled at what they were doing, or they were full-time athletes and they excelled at what they were doing. For some, it's because they shadowed somebody, meaning they observed a physician, maybe a family friend, maybe a community physician, and they were able to get a good letter of recommendation. For some, it's because they were active in extracurricular activities. When you do that, it's not enough just to be a member, by the way. You have to actually be a leader. You have to, or even form your own club or an organization. So those are the things that your interviewer will ask you about. It's not that, did you do this, A, B? No. It's, got the grades, got the GPA, got the MCAT. And after that, it's up to you how to convince whoever the application committee that you have what it takes to be a good physician one day.
Well, thank you, Doctor, very much for your words of wisdom and your time. So thank you for joining us in the Forge today. Discernment isn't a one-time event. It's a daily yes to God's providence. As you navigate your professional growth this week, pray for the courage to follow where He leads, into the deep waters of marriage or the dedicated service of the single life. May Mary, Mother of fairest love, be your guide and your protector. Go in peace to love and to serve the Lord in the middle of the world.
Amen.